Time passes, responsibilities increase, and life seems to move forward. Yet, inside, something remains unchanged. Have you ever noticed that some people, maybe even yourself, seem stuck repeating the same emotional patterns, as if instead of maturing, they've simply learned to mask their fragility? Why do some women, despite reaching adulthood, continue to fall into toxic relationships, seek constant approval, or fear being alone? Does emotional maturity really come with age? Carl Jung believed otherwise. For him, psychological growth was not tied to the passing of years, but to a process he called individuation, an inner journey of uncovering the true self beneath all the layers, confronting fear, and integrating what has long been ignored. If this topic already speaks to you in some way, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And let me know in the comments, have you ever felt like an adult on the outside, but still carried teenage insecurities on the inside? In this video, we'll dive deep into why so many women remain emotionally stuck, even when their lives look stable from the outside. We'll explore the archetype of the Puella Aeterna, the eternal girl, and understand how culture, past wounds, and social conditioning create and sustain this immaturity. Most importantly, we'll uncover what it really takes to break the cycle and become whole. Because growing up isn't about following rules or checking boxes. It's an act of courage. It's the decision to stop performing and start living. And that, as you'll see, has nothing to do with age. Many adult women live trapped in an inner contradiction. On the surface, they appear responsible, independent, even successful. But deep inside, a younger version of themselves remains frozen in time, still waiting to be saved, still hoping for a perfect story that promises love, safety, and meaning. Jung identified this psychological structure as the Puella Aeterna, the eternal girl. It's the archetype of a woman who avoids emotional responsibility, escapes real commitment, and hides in the fantasy of an ideal future. She may be brilliant, creative, even magnetic, but she lives in constant evasion of her own depth. This immaturity isn't always obvious. Many women have learned to cover it up. They hide their insecurities behind charm, smooth their wounds with humor, or act independent while secretly longing for someone to take the lead. But beneath the surface, their identity remains fragmented, built on illusions, fueled by unacknowledged fear. And society doesn't just tolerate this pattern, it reinforces it. From an early age, girls are taught to be pleasant, delicate, emotionally available to others. They're rewarded for being sweet, but discouraged when they're strong. They're taught to prioritize others' opinions, to behave, to be agreeable, but rarely are they taught how to build an identity of their own. What results is a woman who's disconnected from herself, a woman whose choices are shaped by a fear of rejection, who doesn't trust her own intuition, who is constantly scanning the world for permission to exist. Jung reminded us that psychological maturity requires a confrontation with the shadow, those repressed, hidden parts of ourselves we avoid. For some women, this shadow includes the very things they were told to fear: their own strength, their independence, their capacity to stand alone. By denying these aspects, they remain stuck, spinning in cycles of insecurity, dependence, and romanticized illusions that keep them from truly living. Emotional immaturity isn't always messy. Sometimes it wears the mask of perfection. Many women who seem confident, who speak with certainty, smile effortlessly, and appear in control, are silently navigating a world of self-doubt, suppressed fear, and unspoken longing. It's common to see women who appear decisive but avoid true commitment, who crave freedom but unconsciously look for someone to take care of them, who claim they don't need anyone but secretly fear being alone. This contradiction isn't a flaw, it's the symptom of an inner split, a disconnect from the true self. What keeps them stuck? Why do some women mature emotionally while others repeat the same patterns? The answer isn't found in willpower alone, but in the psyche itself. Carl Jung taught that growth only begins when we become aware of what is operating beneath the surface, in the unconscious. What we don't question controls us. And that's where the shift happens, in the moment we stop living on autopilot and start observing ourselves. Emotional immaturity doesn't arise out of nowhere. It's built over time, through unresolved childhood experiences, emotional wounds, and cultural scripts that reinforce dependence, compliance, and fear of rejection. One of the deepest roots of emotional immaturity in women is overprotection during childhood. Many girls are raised in environments where discomfort is avoided at all costs. Mistakes are fixed for them. Pain is minimized. Challenges are removed before they even arise. At first glance, it looks like love, but it silently robs them of the chance to build autonomy. When girls aren't allowed to struggle, they don't learn to trust themselves. They grow up unsure of their ability to solve problems, to make decisions, to stand on their own. As adults, they hesitate. They wait for someone else to take over. What appears as indecisiveness is often a survival response rooted in early conditioning. Emotional trauma deepens this. Rejection, emotional neglect, abandonment, even subtle forms leave lasting imprints. When these wounds go unacknowledged, women build defense mechanisms to protect themselves from feeling that pain again. Some become overly dependent, others avoid intimacy altogether. Many stay in their comfort zones, not because they lack dreams, but because they associate independence with pain. Culture compounds the problem. Girls are taught that their worth lies in how others see them. They're told to be sweet, soft, desirable, but not ambitious, assertive, or powerful. They're given a mirror, but not a compass. And so, maturity is postponed. Life is lived according to others' expectations, and the self remains underdeveloped, waiting. One of the most invisible, yet damaging, signs of emotional immaturity is romantic idealization. Many women who haven't built a stable emotional identity place all their hopes in love. They look to a partner to complete them, to rescue them, to give life meaning. Love becomes a need, not a connection. Red flags are ignored. Pain is justified. Their own growth is sacrificed for the illusion of a fairy tale. When alone, they feel incomplete. When in a relationship, they often place their partner on a pedestal, hoping he'll fill every internal void. But when we hand someone else the responsibility of our happiness, we also hand them the power to destroy us. This same pattern shows up in the inability to take responsibility. Immature women often avoid structure, procrastinate, and fear routine. They see adulthood as a burden and independence as a threat. Like a feminine version of Peter Pan, they dream big, but avoid the effort required to build. In a society obsessed with youth, many women develop a painful relationship with aging. It's not just about looks, it's about visibility. The emotionally immature woman doesn't only fear growing older, she fears becoming invisible, undesirable, unworthy. This fear drives an obsession with perfection, the perfect body, the perfect smile, the perfectly curated life. In chasing that image, many women deny the most valuable thing they have: their journey, their depth, their truth. To avoid facing themselves, they turn to distractions, social media, consumption, superficial relationships, anything to keep them from the silence where the truth lives. This avoidance also affects their careers. The Puella Aeterna often feels lost professionally. She jumps from job to job, avoids long-term goals, and seeks pleasure over purpose. Not because she lacks talent, but because she's terrified of responsibility. And Jung was clear. This state persists as long as we avoid our shadow. In immature women, that shadow holds power, independence, courage, clarity. But when those qualities are repressed, life remains small, dependent, and driven by fear. Jung taught that what we reject doesn't disappear. It becomes shadow. And in many women, the shadow isn't just made of wounds or fears. It contains hidden strength, ambition, assertiveness, autonomy, self-trust. Society may have labeled those traits as too much, unfeminine, or dangerous. So they were pushed aside. But repressing those parts doesn't protect us. It weakens us. Healing begins when we reclaim those disowned traits, when we allow ourselves to be bold, firm, honest, even if that disrupts the image we've maintained. The process of growth is not about becoming someone else. It's about recovering the fullness of who we were before we were told to shrink. Integrating the feminine and the masculine within, feeling and thinking, softness and structure, is what leads to a self that is whole, grounded, and no longer performing for the world. One of the deepest traps of emotional immaturity is the constant hunger for validation. It isn't just about wanting compliments, it's a structure built in childhood, internalized so deeply that it shapes the very foundation of self-worth. Many women grow up believing that their value depends on how they're seen, spoken about, or chosen. And when that belief is never challenged, it becomes an invisible prison. Carl Jung spoke of the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted, the version of ourselves we construct to survive in society. The problem isn't having a persona. We all have one. The real danger is mistaking it for who we truly are. And many women have lived so long from that mask that they've forgotten what life's beneath it. Emotional immaturity often expresses itself as a life lived outward. Every decision is filtered through the fear of rejection, every choice measured by external approval. Life becomes performance, not presence. And while consciously love may be the goal, subconsciously the woman is begging for permission to exist. This pattern shows up in the inability to self-soothe. When self-worth isn't rooted internally, it becomes a fragile reflection of other people's attention. One compliment lifts her. One criticism destroys her. There is no center, no grounding, just an endless reshaping of identity in order to avoid disapproval. But transformation begins the moment we start to see that dynamic clearly. Jung said that what we don't make conscious controls us from the shadows. So the first true act of maturity is to recognize the need for approval without judgment, to understand where it came from. Often, that need is a scar from childhood. A little girl who only felt seen when she performed, who learned that love had conditions. The woman who now seeks approval at every turn may simply be that same child, still adapting, still pleasing, still afraid of being unwanted. And when that wound goes unhealed, it leaks out as projection. Jung described projection as the unconscious process of attributing our disowned traits onto others. In this case, the woman unconsciously gives other people the power to define her worth. She believes that only through their gaze does she become real. But this belief is false, and seeing it for what it is marks the beginning of her freedom. This is where self-responsibility becomes essential. It means no longer blaming, waiting, or postponing. It's the moment a woman says, "This is mine to carry. This is my life. I will not keep handing it over in exchange for comfort." Accepting responsibility isn't a burden, it's empowerment. From that place, she no longer needs to pretend. She doesn't need to fit in. She doesn't need to apologize for being herself. This is when a new kind of worth begins to emerge. Not the kind that's earned, but the kind that's remembered. A value that has nothing to do with roles, appearance, or relational status. a value that doesn't need to be proven, only held. Growing up also means no longer seducing the world to accept you. It means inhabiting yourself fully, your softness, your fire, your contradictions, your silence. Because once you stop building yourself to be loved, you start rebuilding yourself to be whole. And that quiet turning inward, changes everything. Carl Jung taught that within every human being dwell two fundamental psychic energies, anima and animus. For women, anima reflects emotional depth, intuition, and receptivity. Animus represents structure, clarity, assertiveness, and action. These forces are not in conflict, they are complements. And true psychological maturity arises from their integration. However, many emotionally immature women unconsciously reject their inner masculine. As a result, they feel disconnected from their own ability to act, to decide, to stand in their authority. They hesitate when they want to move. They wait when they long to act. They carry a life that doesn't belong to them because they feel incapable of claiming the one that does. Repressing the animus doesn't eliminate it. It distorts it. Jung described the emergence of a negative animus when this energy is not properly integrated. Instead of inner direction and strength, the woman experiences harsh inner criticism, rigid thinking, mental paralysis, and a cold, distant rationality that disconnects her from her heart. This dynamic is often accompanied by a deeply rooted inferiority complex. Many women struggle to trust themselves, their decisions, their vision, their instincts. They compare, they overanalyze, they stay silent when they want to speak. But this fragility isn't natural. It was learned. It was reinforced by a world that discouraged their autonomy from the start. To reclaim inner balance, the animus must be reintegrated. This doesn't mean becoming hard or unemotional. It means reconnecting with the power to choose, to take initiative, to plan, to protect one's truth. It means affirming, I can hold myself. I can make decisions. I can shape my own direction. But there's more. Growth also demands a painful, necessary process, the collapse of the ideal. Women living under the Puella Aeterna often carry fantasies, the perfect partner, the flawless life, the effortless success. But growing up means realizing that these fantasies don't liberate, they limit. Freedom begins with discernment, the ability to tell what's true from what's comforting, to separate who I am from who I was taught to be, to name illusions and let them go. And from there, a more grounded, self-authored identity begins to emerge. This path is not linear. Integration of anima and animus is not a single moment of clarity, but a lifelong dialogue. It requires silence, honesty, emotional courage, and inner listening. Within every woman is a quiet, intuitive guide, one that's often been silenced by conditioning, trauma, or fear. But it's still there, waiting. Jung said, individuation begins the moment we stop identifying with what others expect and start reclaiming what truly belongs to us. Integrating all our inner voices, softness and willpower, emotion and structure, is what allows us to step into a version of ourselves that no longer pleases for survival, but chooses from sovereignty. The woman who reclaims her animus becomes the author of her own life. She doesn't wait to be rescued. She doesn't ask permission. She moves through fear. She acts through uncertainty. Because now she knows, strength doesn't come from outside, it awakens from within. And from that place, a new kind of life begins. Not perfect, but true. Not ideal, but deeply, fully hers. Women trapped in emotional immaturity often don't realize they're stuck. They believe they're being loving, generous, or easy to be around. But beneath that, they're surviving. They're pleasing, they're afraid, they're waiting to be chosen, waiting to be seen, waiting for life to begin. But true transformation doesn't arrive as a grand event. It begins in a quiet, personal moment, when a woman finally looks in the mirror without filters or roles and asks herself, "Who am I beyond what they've expected me to be?" If you've come this far, it's likely because something in you already recognized this path. Maybe you saw parts of yourself in this story. Maybe you noticed patterns you've been repeating. Or maybe, deep down, you've simply felt that you are meant to be more than what you've settled for. And if so, that awareness is already a sign of growth. Because consciousness is the first step of real change. The second is courage, the willingness to face discomfort, to let go of illusions, and to rebuild from a place of honesty. Talking about emotional immaturity isn't easy. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths, to question stories we've told ourselves for years. But in that discomfort lies the seed of transformation. And if something stirred inside you today, don't ignore it, nurture it. If this message spoke to you, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need it. I'd love to hear in the comments, have you recognized these patterns in yourself or someone you care about? What moment in your life made you truly begin to grow? And don't forget to check out the recommended videos now on your screen. One of them may completely shift how you see your own self-discovery journey. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.